Okay, we'll start with this. The continued fallout of this weekend's big fourth-round knockout of the then-reigning champion, WBC Super Featherweight champion, Terry Harpier, at the hands of the very capable, very vivacious Alicia Baumgardner, per tweet from Michael Benson. Eddie Hearn confirmed that there is a rematch clause for Terry Harper versus Alicia Baumgardner after Baumgartner's fourth-round knockout win. And per usual, the people that have a vendetta against Eddie Hearn, against Matchroom, they start their moaning, they start their whining, they start their crying about how Matchroom's always got rematch clauses. They ought to call it Rematch Room when he's just doing right by his fighter.
Yeah.
What kind of crackerjack promoter doesn't ensure that their fighter has that option? You know, there's a lot of people right now, they'd like to see a second Loma versus Lopez fight. And if Loma would have had a rematch clause in the contract, he would have had that option. But he doesn't have that option.
Terry Harper does.
And it's because Terry's handlers, Eddie Hearn, Matchroom, they did their job. They ensured that their fighter is in the best position possible. Should they win or should they lose? Terry lost. And if I'm being honest, I don't think it behooves her to exercise that rematch clause. I propose another course of action. Those of you that have been following this channel will know I don't think Terry should exercise the rematch clause. What I think needs to happen is Terry needs to rebuild next year. That's what she needs to do. She needs to hit the ground running early in 2022, but not against Alicia. She needs to remind herself what she's capable of, what she...
Yeah, look, we've been all through that.
We've talked about that in my previous video. When it comes to the newly crowned WBC Super Featherweight champion, Alicia Baumgartner, I believe that Matchroom has options on this fighter at this time, and I think what Matchroom should do is move to sign Alicia Baumgartner to a multi-fight deal. That's right. I think that it behooves Matchroom.
Sign her.
Before somebody else does, before somebody makes Alicia an offer that she can't refuse, because she's got to look out for herself. She's got to put herself in the best position possible. Matchroom can be a part of that picture. Try and understand that if Terry Harper doesn't exercise the rematch clause, I'm pretty sure
Alicia can move on and fight whoever she wants to fight.
But what better place is there for Alicia's next fight than Matchroom? Should she return to America without Matchroom in her corner, return to obscurity where most of these bandwagon fans we're all seeing, they weren't able to see her fights. They weren't able to keep up with her career. Alicia Baumgartner has legitimate it factor. She's got it all. She's got the skills to pay the bills and the looks,
the work ethic,
the attitude and grace to match. I dare say that Alicia Baumgartner is a very special fighter, special enough that she can spearhead the effort to grow the sport of women's boxing in America better than all those who came before her.
What the fuck I said?
Alicia Baumgartner can help to do in America what Terry Harper was doing in the United Kingdom.
Because Alicia has it all.
She is a fighter that can endear herself to fans for more reasons than one.
She belongs on a big stage.
And I've been saying that for years. Fucking years, alright? Before she went over there to Sheffield and knocked out Terry Harper in just 4 rounds, I've been telling you, this girl, she's got it. She just needs the opportunity.
And this weekend, she got it.
Alicia Baumgartner would be a great addition to the Matchroom stable of Valkyries because Alicia can be used to spearhead the effort for women's boxing and its growth here in America in a way that no other fighters can. They've done great things for the female warriors over there in the United Kingdom. I want to see a similar effort in the United States because Matchroom's not a local outfit. They're global. They got fighters from everywhere. Uzbekistan, Italy, Spain, the UK, the US.
Russia.
I'd like nothing more than to see Alicia fighting on DAZN henceforth. I think that should be the home for her fights. And if Eddie Hearn is smart he'll get while the getting is good.
If Terry don't exercise the rematch clause,
Sign Alicia. Sign Alicia to a multi-fight deal, a co-promotional deal alongside King's Promotions, who, unless I'm mistaken, is Alicia's current promoter, though they're small time. It is a small outfit, not a major one, like Matchroom. You sign Alicia to a 3-fight, maybe even a 4-fight deal, and you enhance her profile. You use Matchroom's reach.
get her the Hugh and Me Choi fight.
There is some outcry out there from the fight fans that have just become aware of Alicia to see her face Michaela Mayer. See her face Michaela sooner than later. But what I'd like to see is I'd like to see Baumgardner versus Choi first. I'd like to see those two world titles consolidated under the Matchroom and DAZN banner, because I know that's what's best for Alicia. If you send her over there to Top Rank now without a major promoter behind her, she's just an opponent. That's how she'll be treated. She'll be the B-side to Michaela Mayer. And I want something better for Alicia Baumgartner, because I know what she can be. I know what she can do. I have known what she can do for years, and now it's here.
This ain't about just making a fight.
This is about all those women boxers in America that don't have a major promoter behind them, and how the sport in the States don't have a face the way it does in the United Kingdom and other parts of the world. This is about the betterment and the greater good of the sport overall than just making a fight between two champions. And I want to see a serious push to bring Alicia Baumgartner into the fold. If you can't beat them,
Join 'em.
or get them to join you. We could be on the precipice of the American Renaissance for women's boxing with Alicia Baumgartner. She's fortunate enough that she's not in a barren weight class. Barren weight classes the way Clarissa Shields has been over the years, which is not her fault. It's outside of Clarissa's control. But you know, Alicia ain't got that problem. There's a lot of girls to go around at super featherweight. Michaela Mayer, Hyun-Mi Choi, Ellen Mekhaled, Terry Harper when she rebounds, Maiva Hamadouche, Eva Brutnitska, Alexandra Sidorenko. I'm not proposing that they put off the Michaela Mayer fight. I'm proposing that they build it, that they give it the same time, the same attention they'd give any other super fight, because that's what that fight could be, and that fight could be the game changer for women boxers in America, because we all know there are more opportunities in Europe for a woman boxer than there are in America. Matchroom can turn Alicia Baumgartner into the superstar that she was born to be. She has the skills, the style, the look, the aesthetic, and all she needs now is the platform. She needs the financial backing of a Matchroom so she can fight on the biggest stages, garner the most attention, the most eyes, and the most ears to what she can do. This weekend's fight was just taste. Just simple. If Terry Harper don't exercise that rematch clause, and I don't know if she will by the time that this video's uploaded, but if she doesn't, the next move, the next logical step, would be to bring Alicia into the fold, because she can do wonders for the sport here in America. In welterweight news ahead of this weekend's big welterweight showdown between Terence Crawford and Sean Showtime Portier, Terence Crawford says he's frustrated he hasn't had the same fate as Canelo Alvarez. The 34-year-old Crawford, who was last in the ring against Kell Brock and cruised to a 4th-round KO last November, reflected on his recent run compared to Alvarez's. He says, "He is definitely doing things differently to me because he is able and capable of doing those things," Crawford told Sky Sports. "He has fought 4 times in the past year. He has become undisputed. He is getting all of the fights that he wants right now. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to. It has been frustrating, but what's meant for me, I will have. Everything happens for a reason, and I believe that my time is coming. I feel like I'm already there, but I have to prove it to the world, and it starts with Sean Porter." Terence is quite right. Canelo Alvarez comes with a financial incentive that makes him an attractive option for anyone at or around his weights. Anywhere 160, 168, even 175. All these guys would love to fight Canelo Alvarez in all the ways that those welterweights didn't want to fight Terence. Keith Thurman,
Danny Garcia,
Errol Spence. When Mikey Gersha decided to climb up to the welterweight division, he didn't have Terence in his crosshairs. He had Errol.
because it was a bigger financial incentive.
I tell you now that if Terence Crawford would have got those fights a long time ago, 2-3 years, the Danny Gersha fight, Danny Gersha, who had no shortage of nice things to say about Terence while Terence was at 140 pounds, though when he got to 147, he seemed to have lost interest. If Terence would have got that Danny Garcia fight, that Keith Thurman fight, and even that Errol Spence Jr. fight, by now, he'd be the cash cow of this division.
I'd pick him to beat all 3 of those guys.
I'd pick Terence Crawford to beat all 3 of them by way of knockout. And that's before Errol Spence Jr.'s eye retina injury, and his car accident. I'd pick him to beat Errol. I did pick him to beat Errol before any of that took place. The difference between Canelo and Terence is that Canelo got to have the fights, the kind of fights that Terence was deprived of. Thus, his marquee value plateaued. It was stifled.
Don't forget the viewership that he brought in fighting little old Jose Benavidez.
Upon Terence Crawford's ascent to the welterweight division from the junior welterweight division, there were a lot of eyes on him. There were a lot of people who wanted to know if he would be able to be the same guy at 147 that he was at 140. Would he be just as dominant? And that was evident in the figures, the viewership for the Jose Benavidez fight. Jose Benavidez, who is on the much taller end of the spectrum as far as welterweights go. There ain't a lot of 6-foot welterweights running around. Terence took him on. There was bad blood between them, and the fight was the most watched fight in all of combat sports, not just boxing, but mixed martial arts as well.
That was the most watched fight in all the combat sports that year.
And if from that, hypothetically speaking, Terence would have got to have that Keith Thurman fight or that Danny Garcia fight, that Errol Spence Jr. fight, his marquee value would have continued to increase, but it plateaued very quickly, I might add, when those PBC welterweights, they froze him out. The PBC had the run of the place. In some ways, they still do. And Errol was more interested in fighting Mikey Gersha.
And unifying with Sean instead of Terence.
Danny Gersha was made an offer, but he wasn't interested either. He was more interested in fighting Adrian Granadios and Ivan Redkach. Keith Thurman, he wasn't all that interested in fighting Terence before the Pacquiao fight or afterwards. Don't let all that talk about send me a contract fool you into thinking that Keith Thurman really wanted that fight, because if he did, he would have at least had a warm-up, a tune-up fight by now to prep him for what could be a Terence Crawford showdown. As it stands, Sean Porter is the only one of those PBC welterweights that has the gumption to cross the street when necessary, to do what needs to be done to fight the best. Sean has...
That's the kind of fighter Sean is.
And that is why Sean Porter has endeared himself to the fight fans in a way that neither Danny Gersha or Keith Thurman or Errol in some circles, even though Errol beat Sean. That's why Sean is still held in such high esteem in spite of faltering some of his biggest fights. He's still viewed as a throwback fighter, a guy who goes by the creed, anytime, any place, anywhere. It's showtime.
Sean Showtime Porter.
In a nutshell, if Terence Crawford didn't get to reach the same heights as a Canelo Alvarez, it's because the growth of his marquee value and his buzz, it was stifled by the politics of boxing, the politics that certain of the PBC's fighters chose to hide behind. Just imagine if Canelo never had that Trout fight after Austin Trout beat Miguel Cotto. That career best win for him. Just imagine if Canelo never got to have that fight, or the Lara fight, or the Cotto fight. Just imagine if Canelo never had the Gennady Golovkin's fight.
Imagine if they hid behind the politics of boxing
and froze Canelo out the way that Terence has been frozen out. Where would that have left Canelo? Hypothetically speaking, just imagine if Canelo Alvarez would have never gotten to fight in those fights. His marquee value here today wouldn't be where it is. It's where it is because he got to fight the fights. Whereas Terence was frozen out by a bunch of guys that really didn't want to know. Although hopefully it's not too late to change that. This weekend he's going to be in action against the PBC's own Sean Porter in a pay-per-view that I have every intention of purchasing. I'm going to support that guy because I know that's a guy that if he could have had those fights, he would have had those fights, but he was unfortunate.
The division was overrun with prima donnas and peacocks.
That soundbite comes to you by way of the Charlo brothers, who were in attendance for Canelo Alvarez's last outing against Caleb Plant, the big undisputed super middleweight championship that is reported to have brought in upwards of 800,000 pay-per-view buys in what is a dwindling American pay-per-view market. So that's really saying something. Going head-to-head with a UFC pay-per-view and still being able to pull in those kinds of buys against a guy who, while he is a champion and he is unbeaten, he's not a household name. We just talked about Canelo Alvarez and the effect of being able to fight those fights, being able to get the fights that you want when you want them, and how that lends itself to a fighter's marquee value. But Canelo Alvarez didn't just happen to come upon this ability. It is something that he worked towards. He fought a prime Erislandy Lara at a time when there was no financial incentive to do so.
There wasn't.
Lara wasn't a champion. He didn't have a belt. I want you to think about the things that took place before we even got here, before Canelo Alvarez became what he became, and how it's those things that got him to this point. You know, he fought Austin Trout right after Austin beat Miguel Cotto. Miguel Cotto, one of the bigger names at that time. Austin beat him, and then Canelo Alvarez. They fought, and Canelo beat him. Canelo loses the Floyd Mayweather Jr. fight, a very big fight, brought in a lot of pay-per-view buys, it did. But after that, he didn't play it safe. He threw caution to the wind, and he took on a pure boxer.
He didn't cruise down easy street after losing to Floyd.
So he could have. Most fighters, especially ones here today, that's what they would have done. After losing to Floyd, he knocks out Alfredo Angulo in a very entertaining fight, and he takes on a dangerous Cuban pure boxer that goes by the name of Erislandy Lara, a prime Lara. He didn't have to have that fight, but he did.
Lara's the kind of guy that would have been swerved here today.
To date, neither of the Charlo brothers have locked horns with Erislandy Lara, and I don't want to hear that bit about how they were all trained by the same guy when Sergey Dedevianchenko and Daniel Jacobs, they had the same trainer, but they still fought when the time came, so that's no excuse for both of the Charlo brothers.
Neither of them fought Lara.
And neither did reigning WBO middleweight champion Demetrius Andrade, who characterized Lara as a boring last resort. Coincidentally, that's what people are calling him here today.
That's karma for you.
That's what that is. Demetrius Andrade, way back when, pulled out on Jermell Charlo. Jermell, who still is in the junior middleweight division, though here today, he is pursuing a fight with Jermall Charlo. Jermall doesn't want to give him the time of day.
So what you got there are three guys that ain't fighting the fight.
Three guys that didn't pay their dues the way that Canelo Alvarez has paid his dues. Three guys who aren't fighting the kind of fights that Canelo Alvarez fought in en route to becoming what he became. Boxing's cash cow. It doesn't happen on its own. It doesn't happen by accident. You have to fight the fights. Some seem to think that Canelo Alvarez's marquee value is directly attributed to his core fans, the Chicano and Mexican fans here in the United States. And while that's true, that's only half true. Not every Mexican fighter of Mexican descent has the same marquee value as Canelo Alvarez. Zurdo Ramirez is a prime example of that. Canelo finds himself where he is because he fought in the kind of fights to get him there.
The kind of fights that made him a better fighter.
The Lara fight that neither of the Charlo brothers or Demetrius Andrade ever had. The Daniel Jacobs fight in the middleweight division. Yet another guy that neither of the Charlo brothers or Demetrius Andrade.
It's another guy they could have fought but didn't.
So that here today, Jermall can watch Canelo Alvarez dominate Caleb Plant, unbeaten Caleb Plant in the super middleweight division, and he thinks he can beat Canelo.
Guy's delusional.
He didn't manhandle a junior middleweight in Brandon Adams or a nondescript opponent in Juan Montiel, so what the fuck's he gonna do to Canelo?
Get knocked out by him.
That's how I see it. As far as I'm concerned, make the fight.